Today is a very, very special episode. The ACA has been around for over 20 years now. It's produced a lot of different shows, but this is, as far as I know, the very first time a theist will be guest hosting on one of those shows. Matt at Dillahunty is looking at me in the audience and says that's not true. I don't know what other things he's talking about, but first one that a guest host is taking calls from. There we go. Okay, yep, that's it. That's what I'm. Well, he says maybe. Well, it doesn't matter. This is a special episode anyway because this is the first Heathen guest host. We can say that. I think the ground is clear for that kind of project. So anyway, please. If you're at home, give a big round of applause to my host today, Ocean the Wizard. Welcome, Ocean.
Hi. I didn't realize you were going to be going with the Wizard, but yeah.
Well,
that's my Twitter handle. It's something that it's a little bit of snark, but that it borrows from the Wizard being a kind of the traveler sort of entity that is based around Odin. So, like, Gandalf in The Hobbit is based on the image of Odin. As well as like many of the dwarves are based on the legend called the Volsung. So there's a lot of like hand in hand with old wizard legends and Norse mythos and that kind of stuff. Yeah, already a bunch of deep stuff there that that we're just dropping right on the fly. I love it. It's great. So the reason why I got you on the show today, Ocean, is because I've seen you around. We've actually talked a little bit before. You're a somewhat frequenter of the ACA Discord. I've seen you on there talking to people and stuff, and I've always been impressed by your level of conversation. You've demonstrated like very well that you like know what you're talking about, and you've got all kinds of just facts and information about the heathenism in general that I just had no idea until really I saw you talking to people about it. And I wanted you to kind of come on here so you could just talk about that a little more, and so that you can just kind of talk about the journey of how you got to where you are. Because as I understand it, you, like me, were also once a Christian, right? Yeah, I grew up as a Christian. I'm born and raised in the South. I'm still in the South. And started out as a Baptist. Like that's where my family kind of like was. So I went from Baptist, and then we moved up into deeper North Georgia, and the Baptist religion got way too conservative for my family at the time. So we wound up drifting into Episcopalianism, which is like a hard left as far as the journey goes, if anybody's familiar with Episcopalianism. I think Robin Williams is described as Catholic light, but like really light. Like, but eventually out of that, I then drifted into a form of Celtic polytheism, and then I've just been developing from there, and I've been polytheist for about 10 years. And now I'm the technical label for what I am, if you want to like try and bring it all out, is really long and confusing, but because it deals with a lot of terms that people generally aren't familiar with. But it's, if I'm going to throw it at you, it's a Druidic syncretic pagan, a syncretic heathen, where I venerate the Germanic pantheon specifically, but I also borrow from the Celtic and Roman and a few others as well. So
yeah, see,
it's been a long like philosophical journey.
Yeah, sounds like it. So like my journey of like kind of deconverting from my previous beliefs was a lot of research on kind of the big three, the Abrahamic traditions of faith, and discovering the different doctrines and such from that faith tradition. And I don't want to say that I didn't look into heathenism, but it wasn't really on my radar. I didn't really know a lot of people who were heathen.
A lot of people don't realize it can be taken seriously. It becomes discounted fairly quickly as like a dead religion that doesn't have any bearing or something like that.
Yeah, and this was something we talked about because my understanding of what most heathens were, at least in today's world, kind of used the heathen mythos, I should say, and not to say, mythos as the metaphor, right?
I use the word myth, so.
Yeah. So like myth is like...
in the Alan Watts sense.
So
with an image of what reality is like. You can have like an atheistic myth of an automatic model.
Right, for sure.
Alan Watts has gone into that a couple of times, it's neat. If you haven't heard Alan Watts, you should check him out. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead. That myth is fine.
Right. So yeah, because if you say myth for a Christian, sometimes they get offended.
They freak out. Yeah.
They freak out. But like, no, I mean myth in the cultural sense, in the in the living sense. So what your understanding of the heathen tradition is that of there are external beings, right? Mm-hmm. And my assumption was that was the minority view, but you're saying that for most heathens today, that is actually the position that they take, right?
So there's no study on it, right? Okay. So and I think a lot of anybody who says most is going to be coming at it from like what their experience is, and people tend to hang out with like-minded people. It's true in the pagan community as well. Mm. And I've been building community online. I've been building a community here in the South. In real life as well, where people can actually physically meet. And what I've found, and it could be just that, how we conduct ourselves attracts a certain brand of person, but that belief in the gods as actual gods is either the most common or becoming more common. I think that the largest body of pagans, I think, still is Wiccans. But heathenry has either overtaken that or is catching up with it. I'm not quite sure. There's definitely a rise in heathenry recently, with a temple being built in Iceland and with more people coming to the practice in America. But without any like actual studies or census on the issue, we can't really say for sure. It's a bit of a mystery. So it's a lot of like shooting from the hip when anybody's trying to say most pagans believe X. But I've certainly been promoting a traditional polytheistic structure. And so have others that have been practicing with me and that have been joining communities that I'm a part of or have started or helped start or anything like that. So.
Interesting. That is a lot. So it seems like almost the same problem that we have sometimes in the atheist community where we try to measure actually how many there are. Depending on the research methods, it can get kind of tricky. Most people just say, well, it's just lack of belief of God. But like, there's a lot of people who say that they're atheists but don't identify with that statement, and kind of vice versa as well.
Yeah, you get people that are like, I'm agnostic, not atheist. Or you get people that are like, hi, I'm, which I... Like Steve McRae, for example, I don't know if you've bumped into him. He's pretty adamant that he is an agnostic and not an atheist, and he has very specific reasons why he says that. And then you have other people that are saying, I'm not an atheist, I'm a non-cognitivist, or I'm, or anybody that doesn't have like philosophical rejection is definitely not an atheist. Anybody who's an agnostic is an atheist. So there's a lot of lack of clarity as far as what, if you're going to take a census, what are you defining as atheist? And then you get also people that are atheists that still follow kind of a new agey structure like spirit science or something like that, where they don't believe in gods per se, but they do believe in some things that are still very religious. So do you consider them atheist? Is another big question.
Right. It can get kind of tricky on the details, because what we might consider in one community what atheist means might not be for some other people. And that's the kind of the tricky thing with definitions. But before we get into like specific beliefs, because I am interested in that, I'm really more curious as like your journey as to how you got from being this, this Christian kid growing up in the South to where you are now. You mentioned
rural South, even.
Yeah. Yeah, so like,
because I didn't convert until let's see, I was a hard Christian until about 20 to 21, and it was through like a number of experiences that I felt that there was like a kind of an overwhelming presence it didn't seem to cohere with my Christian experience. It seemed like there was something else. So that's what started getting me to question of like, well, what is this kind of idea of religious experience? What are we really going into when we're talking about that? Another element was I started drifting away from Christianity, but not spirituality. And I took a walk one day, because Christianity was just like one thing that kept me in Christianity was hell, and I think that's true for a lot of people. Where there's like this threatening punishment of hell, and growing up in the South as a Baptist, that gets drilled into you when you're pretty young. So it stopped making sense as to why a loving God would structure a universe in such a way that you need to like know about a relatively, like when you think about it, obscure historical fact and believe it in order to be saved from the burning pits of hell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I took a long walk on that and trying to convince myself, like, all right, let's bring out all the best guns. Let's talk to myself and kind of try to figure out, okay, how does this work? Let's explain it in a way that does. And I couldn't actually make it work. So at that point, it was just like, well, I think that spirituality has value, but Christianity, it doesn't seem to reflect reality, and it doesn't seem to reflect the description of an all-loving God. So there's parts of the Bible that are problematic for that. And there's a ton of issues when it comes down to like how Christians practice and believe that just are bad logistics.
Yeah.
so how can a perfect God be this bad at logistics was one problem that I had.
Interesting.
I left Christianity at that point, and I became kind of like a quasi-agnostic for a period of time before bumping into paganism.
So before I go on, just letting people know, you're free to call in. We will be taking some questions from people who want to call in and talk to either me or Ocean. Our call lines are open right now, and the number should be on screen. So go ahead and call if you can. So I want to know specifically because, like me, you grew up in the South. You grew up kind of in a cultural bubble of Christianity, even for when it doesn't make sense. To me, the natural inclination is to start doubting everything, is to start doubting all kinds of religious claims. So I'm wondering, like, did you know someone that was heathen? Was it like an internet, or was it, that's a very specific path, it seems.
It is. And I think that to romantically put it, I think the mountains converted me, but I was in a place that has a very, very beautiful nature, that I was surrounded by just like the majesty of nature. And I had a position at that point, as after leaving Christianity, that that there was a kind of like soul to life or a soul to nature kind of thing. There was something that was like an intuition in going through hikes and all this other stuff, spending a lot of time in nature, and I wanted to explore spirituality from that standpoint. And from there, I started finding some things kind of related to old ideas of Celtic belief. I was in college at the time, minoring in religion, majoring in history, and came across some footnotes in history books about the Druids, and thought, well, that's interesting. Let's see a little bit more about it. And through exploring into that and taking the exploration of it very seriously, wound up with some experiences that I found hard to deny, and embraced the exploration aspect of it and kept going down that path. Eventually coming to polytheism and heathenry as a result of just that continued exploration.
And yeah, I remember last time we talked as well, we talked about kind of these personal experiences that you had that seemed really, just like impactful for you. That kind of, would you say that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you say that they helped confirm your beliefs to be true in that sense?
No, I think they led me to different ones. Like I said, the first time that I had it, I was a Christian.
Yeah.
So, it's easy to have that kind of experience as a Christian and explain it through some kind of Christian thing. But for me, it was an experience that was very distinct. So from that, I was like, this is something else. And I was reading the God Delusion at the time, actually. So I was like hovering in between Christianity and maybe leaving Christianity, and at least like giving atheism like its fair shake. And what I thought was its fair shake. I don't think that book is necessarily a fair shake, but continuing on though, that I was entertaining other ideas, but then I bumped into this experience while I was in Ireland at the time, and came away with it. It was just like, this is new. I don't really know what to do with that. So, and then it sat for another year and a half before I actually decided it's like, well, no, what I am is pagan at this point. Is my beliefs had drifted kind of naturally into this direction, and to the point where I kind of discovered, well, the label's different now. It's I'm a pagan. I'm a polytheist.
So it sounds like you were already kind of leaning towards the beliefs that you were kind of researching and studying, and then those experiences kind of helped you confirm some of what you were reading.
No, I think it was the opposite. I didn't start getting into Druidry or reading about it until after my experience that I had as a Christian.
Okay.
And that's the part that was kind of weird.
Your Ireland experience.
Right.
Is that you were still a Christian then?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was on a trip with other Christians, and they relayed having a similar experience. So there was a shared personal gnosis, if you will. That's a term that we use between pagans, is unverified personal gnosis, shared personal gnosis, and verified personal gnosis, which is different definitions on like what level of spiritual experience you're discussing. But that experience was one that was shared between me and other Christians, and they kind of took it as a confirmation of their Christianity, some of them.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, this is distinct. It doesn't seem like the same thing that I experienced during prayer or in church or these other things. So
that's interesting. You were with other Christians who seem to also be experiencing something supernatural, maybe divine,
right.
Something not normal to their daily lives. But you both came away with like different interpretations of that. They
right.
came as like interpretation of the Christian God.
They came as that there was something like we didn't discuss it a whole lot.
Okay.
But there was what happened was people, like, we all took off our shoes, for example, to get closer to the land that we were walking through. It was a place in Ireland that is considered a thin place, where is considered by the Druids to be a thin place, where the line between the spiritual world and the physical world is very thin. And and this is, again, just like one spiritual experience, but it was something that we all kind of felt about the place, and it could be that, like, there's a million ways to explain it, I'm sure. That you have like a group that's experiencing something together, and we all kind of convince one another, or but for me at that point, it was like, this is a spiritual experience. Other people seem to believe that it's also a spiritual experience, but at the risk of repeating myself, for me it was distinct from the Christian experience. And
at least what the Christians have
inspired
described.
me to explore a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting, because I myself have had experiences when I was a Christian that I also once interpreted as, a Christian God. And I think we talked about this before.
But we were on a street epistemology stream together.
Right.
That was fun.
And and I had the same conclusions, as far as I don't think that my experiences are actually matching up with what Christianity says should be happening, first of all, and also just, there could be, and what I later determined to be personally, to be a naturalist explanation for what was going on. I didn't see really a mechanism for why I should believe that it was supernatural in the first place. But
sure.
But and that's kind of where it's hard for me to kind of relate to where you're at right now, because does someone need to have the conceptual framework that you were already working with in order to come to the conclusions that you did about your experiences?
I don't know. In the time that I've been among other pagans, that there's usually a similar sort of story to what I'm describing that brings people into this faith. And Some of them come from an area of Christianity. Some of them come from leaving Christianity and going into atheism, and then leaving atheism. That wasn't. I don't think that I could describe my interim period as being an atheist. I think that I was somebody who just like withheld judgment for a period of time. I got really into Taoism at that point, but that experience that I described was still just kind of like sitting there. And I decided to just kind of explore it and see what it matched up with. And I found some interesting stuff in my study of history going beyond that.
Cool.
So like, the answer is I don't know what, like, I don't think that there is a described set of beliefs that you have to have before becoming polytheist, but
gotcha. Well, let's go ahead.
Being open to it, I'm sure, helps. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you.